a little around so people can introduce themselves. And at the same time, we'll also do a tech check-in to see if things are working for you. So if you want to say your name and maybe where you are in the world, and maybe just like a one-word check-in about how you're doing today. And Charlotte, are you willing to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Charlotte. I work with Brown Sky Solutions out of Montpelier, Vermont. I'm a Collab trainer, and I do a lot of other background stuff. And sorry, what was the other question?
One word about how you're doing, or what's
okay. One word. I am feeling tingly.
Great, welcome.
Thank you.
And Chris Rowe, will you go next? Your name, location, and one word about how you're doing today. Oh, we can't hear you.
Just outside, is that better?
Oh, that's better.
Sorry. Just outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota in the United States. I'm an integral master coach, and one word, excited for spring. It's been a long winter.
Yeah. Nice. Welcome. And Daniel, will you go next, please?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. So I'm in the Boston area. I work for a diagnostics company as an R&D project leader, and I'm feeling good. Waiting for summer actually to come. Sunshine, please.
Nice. Welcome. I'm in New Orleans, so it's 85 degrees Fahrenheit here. So summer's here. Michael Cobb, will you go next?
Sure. I am in Washington, D.C. I am a partner at a very small consulting firm called Strategic Good, and we consult on social enterprise and social mission business. And today I'm feeling a little gloomy because it's rainy here, but not necessarily in a bad way, if that makes sense.
Great. Welcome. Denise?
Hi, I'm Denise Payne. I'm with a strategic design consultancy called Explain. And I'm out of our Duxbury, Massachusetts office. And I am feeling excited about the aspect of spring and jealous for those of you who have great weather.
Welcome. And S. Feinberg, are you willing to go next? Okay, I think they dropped off. Too much pressure. Adrian?
Sure. Hi, my name is Adrian. I guess people do envy me because the weather here is always perfect. I'm in Mexico City. So it never gets too extreme at all. And it's a very nice day. I work for an NGO that's just starting, and we're looking into good practices. And I am in charge of team building and the human element, as we call it. So that's it.
Great, welcome. And Alexi?
Hi, Rebecca. Hi, Dol. I'm in Moscow right now, in Russia. I'm from Russia and working on Kiwi. It's one of the biggest payments providers here in Russia. And I feel cold, as usual, in Russia.
Awesome. Nice to see you.
Welcome, Alexei.
Thank you.
Tiffany? If you're speaking, we can't hear you. You'll want to press the little microphone. Oh, you're not you can't talk, but you're in New York City. Awesome. Welcome. Oh, lots of exclamation points. Great. Very excited. Love it. Adam, Fuzzy, would you go next, please?
Hi, my name is Adam Connor. Also, most people call me Fuzzy. I'm a worker owner at Sassafras Tech Collective in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Nice.
And we're a worker co-op web development business. And today I'm feeling distracted.
Awesome. Welcome. And there's a number of someone who called in here from 781. Doesn't have your name. So whoever's on a phone, would you be willing to introduce yourself? And you'll have to press unmute. I'm not sure how it works on your phone.
Hi, my name is Anne, and I couldn't download the images, so I called in. And I don't know, I gather I'm supposed to say something about the weather. And that's about as much as I understand so far.
Great. If you could, you can let us know where you're at and just one word about how you're doing today.
So I'm doing fine today, and what was the other part?
Where are you at today?
Oh, I'm in Massachusetts, just outside Boston.
Great. Nice. Welcome. We have a lot of people from all over. That's really exciting. So that looks like that's everybody. Did I miss anyone? Anyone not showing up on my screen? Great. So we will move into a little bit more of an extended check-in. I am the communications wizard here at RoundSky, and I've been with RoundSky for about a year. It'll be a year in July. And really, part of why Cecile and I started this webinar today and planned for it is because power and anti-depression work in general has been at the forefront of my brain. Almost always, but especially now with for many reasons. And right now in New Orleans, we're talking a lot about Confederate monuments, and they took one down this morning, which is a pretty big win for a lot of people here. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. I'm originally from California. A lot of my work is, my background is in more of nonprofits and environment. And so I'm really excited to be more in the worker co-op movement. And I'll stop there. Could go on for a while. So I'll introduce you to Cecile. Would you like to say a little bit about yourself and why you wanted to have this webinar?
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca, and thanks, everyone. It's delightful to hear from you all. And I am one of the co-founders of RoundSky Solutions, and I would like to just start by taking a moment to share a little bit of my personal journey, which led me to a deep investigation of destructive power dynamics. And my story really begins as a child. I had the honor to grow up in Istanbul, Turkey, and as an expat kid, I absorbed a sea of different cultures and perspectives all around me. From everything from all the different ways there were to get something done, or all the different types of dress one might see in a trip to the market, to just how different people made tea, for example, and all those differences imprinted a knowledge upon me that there are more ways to see and experience the world than we can really imagine. And that imprinted upon me a knowledge that, we each come from all of these different experiences. And perhaps those different experiences really serve to be a root of our conflict. So after completing a Bachelor of Science at the University of Massachusetts, I was quickly drawn into the life of a social entrepreneur, starting as a farmer. And after two decades of running and operating small businesses, I was hired to launch an online education company. And I was so looking forward to this experience, working with a progressive organization. But the reality reality often can be quite different than rosy expectations. And this was no different here. Really, honestly, the people were fantastic. The vision was amazing, and the operating conditions were toxic. And in short, what happened was that the owners of the company essentially behaved like a king and queen, reserving all decisions for themselves, commanding everyone around as if they were servants, and including like demanding that people be available at all hours of the day to immediately respond to their decrees. So really, sometimes their bad decisions would not only cost the company a lot of money, but also require those of us working in the company to redo weeks of effort for no apparent benefit except to please them. As you might expect, the people were deeply disillusioned and really responded in different ways, from detaching entirely, including, there was such a high turnover rate in the organization, to whitewashing and excusing the behavior of their masters. The parable of the emperor without any clothes was, kind of provided me with a little bit of guidance and solace during that very difficult time. So after that, I was really driven to take a deeper look into my experience, and as is my way, to try to learn about the causes and construct a way to improve these kinds of situations, because I could see that the experience I and my colleagues were having was not unique. It's really endemic. In fact, it's the status quo for organizational operations. And that was deeply disturbing, both to me and to see my colleagues suffering in this way. So seeking a better way, I was inspired to take up a deep dive into organizational and individual development in search of an answer. I was curious about what power is and developed some theories about power to map or explain the dynamics I commonly saw at play in organizations. I synthesized the research I've been doing with my challenging career experiences, both as a cooperative entrepreneur and in organizations like the one I mentioned earlier. And from that research, I created a map of what organizations need to communicate about, including a set of processes that we call Collab, that reliably deliver healthy power in action when once integrated into organizations. So I'm really delighted to be here with you all today to talk about this really incredibly important aspect of our lives together and explore ways of actively untangling destructive power dynamics in our teams. So just to give you a sense of what we're planning to do in this webinar today, we're going to spend a little time with the big picture of what power is and why it might matter. Before we head into some examples of destructive power, from you all, and then we'll dig into the 5 tips for untangling these destructive power dynamics and wrap up with some Q&A before we close with some next steps for you to consider. So let's take a step back and look at our definitions and understandings of power, what it is and why does it matter. My quest through both academic and practical approaches to organizational health, I formulated a hypothesis that at the root of all organizational dysfunction lies the misuse and the misdistribution of power. Now, I didn't know if my hypothesis was correct, but in order to explore that hypothesis, I really had to settle on a useful definition of power, because as you might be aware, there's quite a range of different understandings and definitions about what power is. From everything from something only leaders and politicians have, to it being the opposite of love and therefore something to be eschewed, to explorations of power over, power with, power to, and power within. Really, there's a dizzying array of different understandings of what power is. And I found the definition that offered the most useful framing for integrating lots of existing definitions was Paul Tillich's definition of power as the drive of everything, every living thing, to realize itself with increasing intensity and extensity. This most directly informed the working definition that I have of power as the force of enactment, within which many of the definitions of power naturally fall. Now, within this broad definition of power, it becomes more clear that there are healthy or generative ways for power to be used, and there are destructive uses of power. And that for most of us, the destructive use of power is deeply concerning, which is why we're all here today exploring this topic. Before I go any further, I just want to clarify that I was particularly interested in the day-to-day impacts of destructive power and have chosen to focus this work on what happens inside intact organizations, which is where most of us spend most of our time. Therefore, the exploration about what to do with the destructive uses of power we experience from outside our organizations, such as the workings of our governments, are really outside the scope of this call, though they are very much worth exploring. Fundamentally, I posit that the best place that we can start to undo these endemic tendencies to use destructive power are the places we spend most of the time using the force of enactment, and that's at work and at home, rather than at the polls, which we visit for 15 minutes every few years. And back to you, Rebecca.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that. I think what stands out for me in that is just this, we spend so much time in our work, 40 plus hours a week, and it's a really rich place to start looking at how power is, in addition to all the other ways that power shows up in our lives and impacts groups of people. And so this webinar is really focused on the workplace, and that feels really important to me. And so to dive in a little bit more and to hear from you all, I wanted to get maybe 1 or 2 people or 3, if you're really inspired, to share a moment of how power dynamics have gone wrong, destructive power dynamics in your workplace. Maybe not naming names, your choice. And I can start with my own, and then we can go on from there just to kind of ground ourselves in why we're even here. So at a previous workplace for myself, a traditional hierarchical nonprofit, pretty small. There was about 5 of us. My boss at the time we would have a shared decision-making process, kind of, but what would really end up being was lots of time, our time wasted, the employees wasted, because what we thought was a shared decision-making process was actually just a way to kind of build camaraderie, but it didn't actually matter to him. I think this is a tactic that huge institutions use on a greater level of getting people's opinions rather than real shared power. And so that's something that I've experienced, which brought me into more of this economic justice framework that I'm seeking. So that's my example. Hopefully that makes sense. And does anyone else want to share what a power dynamic that brought them here that's on the forefront of their mind before we keep going?
Sure, I can share. So not so long ago, as I was saying at the beginning, we were just starting, and that doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of work behind. So we've been working for 4 years, some of us 2 years, and some others. But we just joined and we merged with another project, and there was this one person that was hogging most of the decision making, but it was not Machiavellic, like what you're saying, like it's just team building or they didn't really matter. It's not like that. It was not like that. It was more of a how things happened on their own sort of thing. And when we realized that as a team, we didn't really know how to tackle the problem because he had a lot of the decisions within the team on his hands, but he didn't want to have them, but it was there. So we were trying to figure out how to deal with it. And we've been doing great progress within the last couple of months to untangle that situation. But it's always good to hear from other people what they think and how they tackled it, like how they managed certain stuff like it. So
thanks for sharing.
Sure.
I definitely resonate with that. And I'm would love to hear more at some point, perhaps after this call. Does anybody else would anyone else like to share a moment?
I would like to share. This is Fuzzy from Ann Arbor. So I'm, as I said, a member of a worker co-op called Sassafras Tech Collective, and we have a very nominally egalitarian structure where worker co-ops, everyone.
You're cutting out a little bit.
Who had been with us for a year just quit, and she said the reason she quit was because she felt bullied by one of the other worker owners. The one who she felt bullied by was one of the founding members and tends to have strong opinions and also knows a lot, has a lot of education, and knows a lot about the work we do, and has, well, doesn't like to be challenged on his knowledge, and so it's we're sort of realizing that we need to do some work internally to figure out what's going on and how we can have a more peaceful workplace, I suppose.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. That is, and I know that you are not alone, and that happens often, especially with founders, and I think that lots of other dynamics come in to power and how people relate to each other. So does someone else want to share?
I'd like to.
Sure, please.
I'd like to know, my example is coming from dealing with a state agency. Does that qualify, or do you want people talking inside the cooperative framework?
Whatever you're coming from is what we want to hear.
I volunteer for an agency that is concerned with elder services. And I'm accepted as long as I perform as a volunteer. But if I also try to be a client, which it is my right to do, and ask for help, I am penalized. And there's no recourse anywhere in the governmental system. So it's a pretty blatant use of power to ignore somebody and their requests.
Absolutely. And I think part of power is that, which you kind of alluded to, is accountability there. How do we get accountability? Thanks for sharing. With that, I would like to pass it back to Cecile. And what I'll do is we have this document that I'll write just some high-level notes on so we can follow along if that's helpful for you. I'm a visual person, so perhaps someone else is too.
Thanks, Rebecca, and thanks, everyone. I really appreciate all those examples, and I hope to touch base on them throughout the kind of discussion of the 5 tips and then also our question and answer period. So I wanted to start by just saying that one of the discoveries in my research is that communication is one of the key places where power flows in an organization. Now, in other words, the cool thing about communication is that it can be structured to deliver more balanced generative power, which is key to overcoming these entrenched stale power dynamics that we're also very familiar with. So if there's one overarching insight I can offer you, is that power is constrained and enabled through how we communicate and share information with each other as we go about our work. The thing about it is that it's usually completely inadequate to simply train individuals to use principles while they communicate. While that may be important, it's also inadequate, and this is true for lots of reasons. One key reason is that we as individuals don't operate in a vacuum. We operate on teams that are part of a larger organization. Therefore, based on all my research and the work I've been doing, instituting team or organization-wide generative communication practices is the most useful and efficient point of leverage for providing a structure for sharing power to which all members of an organization can be accountable. On that note, let's dig into the specifics of the 5 tips. Tip number 1 is really about initiating a facilitated meeting practice that distributes power. So what do I really mean by that? Simply having a meeting practice that has been constructed to explicitly share power between members of a team is an effective way of eliminating a lot of the power dynamics that are usually present in an organizational communication. And some of those examples you guys have already mentioned, a few people having all the airtime, making all the decisions, to no one really saying anything in meetings, to a lack of clarity on the outcomes leading to exacerbated power dynamics, and the list goes on and on. So let me give you an example. Often meetings either have no clear facilitator to move things along and keep us focused on outcomes, or they are facilitated by the manager or leader who holds most of the power on the team already, leading to continued and aggravated disempowerment and meetings that don't feel useful to most people. So one simple solution is to institute a practice of electing someone to the role of facilitator who has the clear accountability to take the team through the meeting processes, including redirecting or even cutting off discussion that's not relevant to the issue under discussion. And this is just one piece of many, many important ways to construct a meeting process that reduces destructive power dynamics. The trick with the rest of this tip is to research and build a meeting practice which at every step of the way undoes these destructive power dynamics and encourages generative ones instead. Here at Round Sky, we've developed and tested what we call the standard meeting practice, which is easy to learn and in practice really enables generative power. Rebecca will be sending out a PDF of the summary of this practice in our follow-up email, and you're welcome to give it a try. But do note that there's a great deal of information behind each of the steps in that standard meeting practice, which we can't include in a summary, but is available for you to learn about through our newly created Pay What You Can Collab 101 online course, and of course our book, which is a guide to managing healthy power dynamics in organizations, and which you can access through our website under the Resources tab. Now on to tip 2. Implement a proven collective decision-making process such as integrative consent, which is what we've developed and teach here at Round Sky. This tip points to a place where any number of destructive power dynamics reside, and the examples you all listed really called out a few of those, like one person making a lot of the decisions, even if they don't really want to, but they're still on the hook for that. And sometimes these decisions are made with input, back to Rebecca's example, but nevertheless, they are the one making the final decision, which leaves the rest of the team having to just abide with that decision, whether or not they agree or can get on board or see something really wrong with it. And if it's not the manager or leader making decisions without a clear and effective process, it usually reverts to the people with the loudest voices who will prevail, thus generating decisions through force of voice, which usually leaves many, many team members out. And if teams are attempting consensus decision making as a process, then another set of issues presides, usually frustration around how long it can take to come to a decision. We found that consensus or even a majority voting process also doesn't address all the important concerns, and thus structural power dynamics may continue or even be exacerbated. Fortunately, there's another way, which involves clarifying which decisions do need to be made by the team together and which do not, and then using an effective and rapid decision-making process that includes all the perspectives on a team. Rebecca will also send out this summary of integrative consent in your follow-up email, and I'd love to hear if you put it to use, any questions you might have. And further demonstration and instruction is available through Collab 101. So tip number 3 is to get ops reports or report packs going to ensure accountability in your team or in your organization. So this is another really common place for destructive power dynamics, and it has to do with accountability. Let me offer some examples. The most productive individuals on a team get a disproportionate amount of work heaped on them, leading to burnout. Another one is that others may take on much less than they could. Another trouble is well-meaning people committing to projects and then forgetting about them. And as one of the examples was just a moment ago, without accountability, people can do stuff that's just really not okay and not useful or helpful for anyone, the organization or the people they're helping. The key here is to have a place where everyone's work is transparently tracked and reported on with regularity so that we can all see and hear what's going on and what's coming up. This usually eliminates many of the destructive dynamics and encourages an increase in productivity. It also works as a mechanism to get people off a team that are veteran underproducers because their work is now visible to all and prevents them from kind of getting away with doing as little as possible, which will either encourage them to increase their own productivity or move on to another place to work. This accountability practice also reveals who is taking on what kind of work on your team, such as gendered work, like women disproportionately taking on both more work in general and then specific administrative tasks rather than taking the lead on company projects. So when it's clear who's doing what work and how much, you can begin to redistribute that workload as your team sees fit. So tip number 4 is to develop your roles and accountabilities as a team and get them clear and written down. So another way of saying this would simply be to make what power does exist on your team clear, explicit, and written down. This also makes it possible for us to change that in the future, which is very helpful, especially with those of us dealing with founder fusion, which a couple of you mentioned. One of the most common sources of failed power dynamics really comes from the lack of clarity around who is doing what. In other words, power use is implicit or partially obfuscated or hidden entirely. And this can lead to chronic frustration, balls being dropped, work duplicated, people feeling bossed around, micromanaged, and the overburdening of the most productive individuals, as I mentioned above. And the key here is to have a process whereby your roles with specific accountabilities can be developed and evolved to match the conditions that your team is currently in and the priorities that you have. We recommend a simple format for brainstorming your team roles and accountabilities and passing them as a shared agreement between all team members. In other words, not having them just developed by your current manager or leader or owner, but by the whole team. And then electing people as a team to those roles and getting those roles and accountabilities into a team database so that everyone can see what everyone else is accountable for. Now, obviously, what I've just laid out is, in fact, very complex and requires all sorts of negotiating and compromising, as well as a robust commitment to learning and self-improvement, which is why we recommend you work with a trained facilitator or follow up with us to get some training on this sort of thing. Otherwise, the process can easily fall apart. But don't fear, pursuing this project will lead to more clarity, joyful workplaces, and a reduction in the power dynamics that aren't working. We found this clarity around roles a very necessary and welcoming way to get accountability in our team and ensure alignment and reduce task dropping. Rebecca will also send out a summary of the role generation process that we have and can recommend for you in our follow-up email, and we hope you give it a try and let us know how it goes. So tip number 5 relates to the ones I've already mentioned, but is super foundational, and it's to make information across the organization transparent. So what does this really mean? Having, information is essentially a form of power, and the list of destructive power dynamics that result from lack of transparency is long indeed. You know, from people disengaging from their work to outright wrongdoing happening under the noses of good people simply because it was invisible. The key to this tip is having an organization-wide database for all organizational information, including financial information, decisions made in meetings such as policies and roles, and project tracking. And here at Round Sky, we've developed a set of simple tracking docs on Google that can work for teams that are just getting started with the practice. For more advanced organizations, there are other databases that might be more effective. And then the follow-up email, Rebecca's going to include the links to those Google Doc templates. You're welcome to copy and put them to use for your teams. So now that we've covered these 5 tips, I'd like to circle back to any questions or comments you have, including your specific instances. And since we have so many of us on the call right now, I think I'd like to ask you to use the chat box, and Rebecca will pick out a few questions worth putting to the whole group. And if for some reason we don't get to your question at this time, we'll follow up with you directly afterwards.
Great. Thanks, Cecile. Hopefully those tips are helpful for people. I know there's lots of information in there. And Daniel has a question, and it is what to do with individual team members who do not comply with the reporting tasks and who have relationships with people of power higher in the organization.
Fantastic question. So I'm going to treat those as 2 separate questions. The first being, what do you do with people who just are refusing to participate in reporting? And the advice I would offer you is to start by putting them on the spot. The way that ops reports happen is that, or that we recommend, is that you go one person at a time and we hear from everyone. Just a quick report. What have you done on a project? What do you intend to do going forward? Then at the end of that individual report out, we get a chance for questions, comments, and appreciations. Now imagine you've been through 4 people who've reported on their work, they've made good progress, they've gotten lots of appreciations, and you come to the dud, you know, the person who's done nothing, right? Or visibly nothing, right? You know, it's kind of embarrassing to be there like, oh, I'm just not going to do anything, and or I've done a lot of stuff, but I don't feel like reporting. All of those, you know, are going to leave that person on a very uncomfortable hot seat. After going through that type of a meeting process for several times, what I generally find is that people begin to comply. They begin to understand why it's important, not just to them, but to their team, and come on board with a more of a collective mindset, like I'm here to serve the team, not just to serve myself. So it's a transformation. It doesn't happen immediately, but persisting and keeping the structure of your process intact, not making exceptions for them, very important. In fact, you can give those type of individuals a specific project to get their projects up on the tracker. And if that's the only thing they report on for the first few times, they'll at least be doing that. Yeah. So to your second question about what to do with that individual that may also have ties higher up in the organization, I would probably need to hear a little bit more of some concrete examples where that plays out. But the ability to sort of concretely articulate what power that individual has will usually leave out the part where they get to say, oh, the boss is my friend, therefore all of you have to do what I say. That's my role. I'm the boss's friend, and my accountability is you all have to do what I say. I'm exaggerating for effect. But those types of roles and accountabilities are not likely to be passed in a team, in which case their power with the higher up is going to become something which really just doesn't apply in this situation, and for which the rest of the team members can call that individual out and say, you know what, that's not within your accountabilities to make that decision. That rests with this individual over here that we've elected to that role.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, it kind of helps.
Go ahead,
Can you hear me? Yeah, so it's a bit more tricky in that case. Mm-hmm. It's a cross-functional team in a product development project, and the particular function is business. And we do need the inputs from business, and business does things to drive market launches. But they also are the ones the team delivers to. So sometimes business feels like a time, this person has good relationships to my boss. So that makes any enforcement of things in my team with her kind of difficult, because invariably it goes up to my boss. And then I have him. So this is kind of the power dynamics there. I totally concur, and it did help to get the team dynamics. Everybody's doing it except her. So at some point she started to, but it's still a bit of an exception that she does it consistently. So I was just maybe hoping to get a little bit of more guidance even. I mean, I don't think that going the power line and then, you know, going to my boss and then back to her will work. It has to, she would have to be convinced, right? But what is it that would get her to do this consistently? That's the question.
And what you're asking about having her do consistently is the reporting out on what she's actually doing, or is it something else that I didn't quite catch?
There's, I think it's just a phenotype, it's just an example of when the power struggle happens.
Yeah.
And I brought it up in that context, but there's more behind. Yeah, it's really a power dynamic in the team.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I again would suggest that you look at solidifying or making your team meeting process more concrete and explicit, and something that the entire team, including her, has had a chance to consent upon, including like what are the various steps, what are the expectations. There's an opportunity for the whole team to consent. That's just like a step number one. The power that that individual has to kind of influence your boss is also something that I would want to put under a microscope and say, okay, you've got a role, it's very important for us, you're doing some really key work for us, but what are those specific accountabilities that we want you to have? And within that process, you would also want to call out what are the specific accountabilities of your boss. So your boss is a title, but they have specific roles that they're going to deliver on. And that process of making both of those two individuals' roles and accountabilities explicit will both answer a number of questions and call out where there may be kind of communication happening that's not serving the team, that perhaps those two are making decisions that really belong to the team as a decision, not the boss. Or maybe they don't, maybe they do belong to the boss, but the opportunity to make those roles and accountabilities explicit will help to reduce that friction, that chance for power dynamics to kind of run the show for you all. Yeah,
it's kind of challenging to tell or ask my boss what the role is, you know?
Absolutely.
By the way, overall, I think should be, he's going to be like, no, I don't think so. What my role is.
I didn't quite catch that last bit there. Sorry, you're a little muffled.
What the recommendation is, I think what I'm hearing is, if you have the power dynamics of an individual in your team with an influence on your boss, make both of their roles clear in the context of what you're trying to achieve in the team, right?
Exactly.
So I'm finding the challenges to communicate to my boss what I expect the role should be that he's fulfilling.
Yes. Nice.
But, I mean, it's a tough dialogue to be had, but I mean, it seems like that's the solution.
It is a solution, and I think when you see the role generation process, you'll see that it's a set of steps that really everyone on a team will go through. And so if your boss is on the team, they will also go through it. There's also a really fun kind of brainstorming way of doing this, where all the members, including the boss, would do this collectively in a room together. And that's, it really actually is much less threatening for someone who's in a boss role to sort of participate in that with the rest of the team members. And it can even be of value for them because they get to have more clarity over what everyone else is doing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Good
Thanks
question.
For the question. Keep your questions coming through the chat box if you have any. And while people think of their questions, I just wanted to point out that thank Thomas for the comment in here about accountability. And maybe Cecile can speak to this a little bit around I'll just read the comment out. I don't think you can see it, Cecile. So he said that in several of my early jobs with small entrepreneurs, farmers, carpenters, and a consultant, I struggled with the communication dynamic. I believe a big part of this was unclear expectations around communication. I appreciate the distinction there that this was a power imbalance. It's a continued place of learning for me to own my power and working for balance and partnerships, work and otherwise. Thomas, I don't know if you want to say anything more. I know that wasn't a question. Sorry to call you out a little bit.
No, thanks. Yeah, I think it cuts both ways, but as a employee, I think not that I don't want to take away my responsibility in it, but I think it is behoove of the employer to set up a framework for how they can be accountable. And so I think somebody already mentioned it earlier about, folks just kind of not responding or not responding to questions. And remembering that dynamic in work relationships and how that was really a struggle at the time, and just saying those might have felt like, in describing them, they seemed like a small thing in the bigger force of the work, but just thinking it's such a bottleneck for building that relationship and making it to a healthier work experience in total. If that makes sense.
It really does. Yeah, thanks for that comment, Thomas. And I guess I would just sort of jump off that a bit to say that one of the reasons that we feel Collab is such a powerful tool is that it establishes ground rules for the whole organization or a whole team, wherever you choose to start to implement or take it, and for healthy communication. And it's a kind of a plug and play operating system. So a lot of the trouble with, organizations that don't have something that is clear, comprehensive, and effective is that it actually takes quite a lot of thought work to understand what would that look like. But once you have something like that, then the value of having this be a consistent set of practices across an entire organization and including your vendors, subcontractors, is really eliminates so much of the frustration that we commonly experience in having inadequate communication systems set up. And so sometimes I meet with organizations that are like, I have no idea how we would put this to use throughout our whole organization, or why that would even be helpful. And your example really points to why things as minor as perhaps miscommunication with a subcontractor can really be reflective of larger conditions within an organization that are quite costly actually to productivity, engagement, turnover, all those kinds of things.
Great. Thanks for that, Cecile. We have some more time here. Do other people have other questions or maybe thoughts that they want more information about? It doesn't have to be a formulated question necessarily.
I think there's a lot of different ways. I think Daniel was bringing up earlier about having the hard conversations with an employer or boss, or just anywhere where there's feels like there's a little bit of power over. It's something that a friend of mine's mentioned a lot of, where she felt like she's been a squeaky wheel in a lot of organizations, and she was like, well, everyone seems dissatisfied with something, so she wants to give voice to it, to a thing, and she's feels like she's been scapegoated or fired at times, and just kind of wondering, it's wow, how do you make that balance when it feels like on the one hand it feels like could be a possible insurrection, but nobody's it's not. It's like how to start moving towards a healthy power dynamic without martyring yourself, I guess, or without turning into just finger pointing. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally. Yeah, I laugh only because I've had way too many experiences myself of the same.
Right.
And honestly, I mean, in a nutshell, people who are the squeaky wheel, sometimes they get the grease, but often they get the boot. So it really a major source of problem, that if an organization is set up to kind of eliminate any voicing of tension, so to speak, of issues, of things that aren't working, it's a toxic workplace, one way or another. And so to answer your question more directly, my experience is that starting by introducing something as benign as a standard meeting practice is a really pretty safe way to go. Because you're not like stepping up in the face immediately of whoever holds the power and saying, you. You're simply offering a better container for the entire team to raise their tensions in. So one of the things that the standard meeting practice has is that agendas are built by the individuals who are attending through their sensing and naming the tensions that are coming up for them. And so everyone has the opportunity to raise their tensions, get them on the agenda, get them processed. This reduces the amount of kind of scapegoating that happens with any individual who might raise a tension that's, for whatever reason, gonna raise hackles of the people in power. So it's a nice and relatively easy way to say something else is needed here, and I'm going to set the stage for it to be collectively voiced rather than me being the scapegoat in this situation.
Great. Thanks, Cecile.
Nice. So the balance with that is like I like the way you said it was so clear. I find when I'm in that position myself, I have to struggle with like going into making it passive aggressive in some way. Like I got to stick with my, it's like I'm doing this intentional meeting practice because it in itself is an important piece. I'm not doing it as a form of manipulation, but it's like, this is one piece that's important and we're just making baby steps. And just, it's like I really have to check my energy with it, because I feel like in making those changes, that energy does inform the group, and the group is listening to that as you make these organizational changes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important. The outside of your frustration, how do you frame that for your team? Definitely. And there's another question from Fuzzy. Can you speak about invisible power dynamics in consensus processes, invisible and unintentional? Those wielding the power would prefer an egalitarian environment, but there are oppressions and other issues in play that makes them feel disempowered. You got that?
I think so. I'm not 100% certain, but if I were to summarize, I would say the sort of request is to talk a little bit about how implicit or hidden power dynamics, even in groups that have good intentions, can be transformed into stuff that works better. Is that accurate?
Feel free to respond.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, fantastic question. I mean, honestly, so much of what doesn't work for groups that are at least committed to, trying to work together collaboratively are these implicit power dynamics, these implicit power flows. And what I found is having a clear process whereby anyone's tensions or issues, things that they think could be better for a team, have a place to be raised that's neutral and safe and will reliably get to an incremental movement forward, will naturally kind of pull from what's implicit, what's hidden. It'll pull from there in incremental little bites and get those moving forward in a way that works for everyone. The problem with implicit power dynamics is that those who are wielding them can sometimes even be ashamed that they are holding that much power, right? Or very ambivalent, like they really want to share more power, but they don't know how, and they're holding all this power and they've got some attachment to it, but it's this really complex mixture of interpersonal and personal dynamic around it. And so...
That's exactly...
Sorry, go ahead.
I just said, yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's super tricky, and the key is to be able to bring those up in a neutral space, and to not single those people out, not to put extra shame on them. It's obviously not going to help, but how you do that, I would recommend this what seems fairly simple. There's a lot of nuance to it, but this agenda building process of having people surface their tensions, really sense what's up for them, put them on the agenda, and have an effective facilitator take their agenda item through to an incremental improvement forward. Now, notice I'll emphasize incremental. These implicit power dynamics can take months, if not years, to actually fully unwind. And so having some patience with that, very important. Because again, these are transformational processes, and they will take time. So having some patience, but also having an effective process whereby everyone can see that some of these issues are now finally getting addressed. One of the biggest experiences new teams have is just a huge sense of relief that finally the stuff that's been bugging all of us, except that one person or whatever, they're finally getting addressed. And in a way that doesn't, shame that other person or make them bad for where they've been.
And if I might add something here, is that I think you were saying this earlier, Fuzzy, around how there's a sense of bullying that's happening, or like that's feeling like that's happening. And in terms of like bringing up something in a meeting, it might look like ensuring that everyone gets their turn to speak. Right, because I think the way that a bully works is that they're a little bit louder and more forceful than other people, and so that could be an example of how to incrementally bring it forward. Like there's lots of play there. I don't know if that speaks at all to you or helps.
Can you repeat that solution that you suggested?
Sure. Using your example from earlier, my thought is that in one of our meetings, if let's say Cecile was bullying, if I felt like Cecile was bullying me or other people or people in general in the company, I might put an agenda item up saying, getting everyone a chance to speak, or just getting the part of where I'm feeling bullied at. And I might say that might be my solution is asking Cecile to be more conscious of the time space she takes up in a meeting so that I can bring up things and feel comfortable. Or the solution could be that we really ensure that everyone gets a chance to say something, which in our meetings we do, but perhaps in your meetings that's not a process for you. But then that also takes time and culture to create that new habit. So I think that little pieces to move it forward are the parts that I'm just highlighting that Cecile has said. Is that helpful or interesting?
Sure.
Great. And another question came up piggybacking off of yours is from Michael asking if you could speak to different personality types in this case.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Thank you, Michael. So one of the biggest dilemmas on teams, of course, is that we are a wide range of different types of personalities. Some of us require a little more time to think through things. Others like to talk it out and need a lot of opportunity to just hear themselves speak. And those are just a couple of random examples of differences in personality type. And so I definitely encourage teams in their personal development to adopt a personality lens for use in their organization. In our case, we prefer the Enneagram. The MBTI is very well known out there. There's others. So it doesn't really matter what you choose as long as it is a common language that the whole team can speak. And that really helps mutual understanding on one level, but that's only one slice of the solution. the key to really having an equitable balance between different personality types is, in my opinion, a structured communication process that enables all of those different types of personalities to get their communication needs addressed. So let me give you a couple of examples. One of them is from my life. You know, I'm one of the individuals that prefers to have an initial discussion and think about it a little. Sometimes, you know, it'll take me 24 hours to have that further insight that's like, aha. And so having a meeting process whereby any decision we make can be revisited at any time has been critical, because it's given me the leeway to be like, okay, yeah, we made that decision today, but if I'm feeling differently about it tomorrow or next week, I can immediately get it back up there and we can, you know, integrate my perspective on it. One more example for you is another super common one is individuals who tend to talk over or talk a lot. And the solution within Collab is to have a set of processes which really use rounds a fair bit, so everyone gets a chance to speak, but then we're also going to hear from everyone. If someone really doesn't want to talk, they can simply say that, but at least they're given the floor. That's very different than having to shout someone else down in order to have the floor. And so that very simple mechanism really does help to rebalance that tendency between overtalkers and undertalkers. Did you have any other sort of insights yourself about personality in the workplace and power, or any other questions about that?
No, I think those things that you mentioned are definitely helpful in terms of the common language and the structuring communications and whatnot. I guess, you know, there's just sometimes where folks are more even opinionated about things rather than even just talking over, so more go with the flow. I think the structures help to mitigate that to a degree. No, nothing comes to the top of my mind. Thank you for addressing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think in our team, for me, I often come back to the Enneagram. It's a personality, like a personality type thing about what motivates you. And when I'm struggling with any of my teammates, which happens because we're doing hard work, is like knowing what motivates Cecile and knowing and thinking about, I'm a 3, so work really motivates me. And if I feel like my work isn't doing well, then I don't feel motivated. That's really telling, I think, for my teammates about how I'm going to respond about someone asking about something being done or expressing frustration with something. So I think knowing your teammates and what makes them tick in ways is really important to the nuances. Did that answer your question, Thomas?
Yeah, thanks.
Great. Awesome. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I think it became less helpful near the end of this. But I wanted to just kind of wrap up here and hear from each of you. Maybe, I know we've lost a few people. It's a little bit past 4. Maybe a quick thing about what you're taking away from this, and trying to be brief so we can respect each other's time, and then we'll do a quick close. And Charlotte, would you be willing to go first? You're just right next to me.
Yeah, thanks everyone. You know, to be honest, I've heard the intro to this discussion of power a few times, and it has been revolutionary in my life, and it's no different today. I think every time I hear Cecile talk about her deep work into this subject, I'm affected, and I heal a little bit more from the dynamics that I've suffered, the negative dynamics that I suffered in the past, because it's a little easier to realize that it wasn't me. Because to be honest, I was the whistleblower in every job, that I was ever in, because I was like, this is wrong. And people would be like, you're fired. I mean, it didn't happen like that every year of my life, but it's like it happened. And so that's, that's real. And that's part of the reason I do the work I do. And thanks everyone for being here. And thanks Cecile and Rebecca for putting this together.
Thanks, Charlotte. Daniel, are you willing to go next? Sorry, Daniel, are you willing to go next? Not sure if you're working on unmuting. There we go.
Sorry, I'm next on.
Sorry, sorry. Yeah. Can you repeat that? I didn't hear you.
I understood that I'm next.
Yes, you are.
On what?
Just something that you're taking from this, if anything, something that stood out for you briefly.
Great comprehensive overview on power dynamics, I think, in different forms. What I take is that many of the tips are actually standard project management in a way, roles and responsibility, project reporting, facilitation of meetings to balance power. The learning was that it is actually, I have never thought of project management as a way to address or establish a balance of power. That was a new dimension in my thinking. So thanks for sharing that. Great feedback on many of the questions. I think everybody took something away that they can immediately act on. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Adrian, will you go next?
Sure. Yeah, I've been taking notes, and some of the things that we've been doing match perfectly with what's being said. Some of the things have not been reinforced as much. Like we come from a cooperative experience generally, so most of us have a good meeting like demeanor. We all know what to do, when to do, what not to do. We're very careful about other people's feelings. We try to be compassionate about everything. So those things work really well. But when it comes to implementing them, there's always these nuances you were talking about that you have to pay attention to. So I think we're on a good track here. And it's been really great to hear from all of you. And it's been really great questions and answers. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And please let me know if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Rodriguez, would you care to check out with something that you're taking from this? If you're speaking, we can't hear you. Oh, okay. You're not muted. Okay, well, if you're on the phone. Okay, great. You can type it, and I will read it out. And in the meantime, we'll go to Michael. Michael, would you be willing to check out?
Sure. Just echoing what someone else had said, I think the amount that these power dynamics are not as much about feelings and working with people as it is about setting up the right structure. I think that's really liberating, and it seems like 90% of this, from what you're saying, is structural, and that seems to really resonate with me, because that's something that we can easily implement. And look forward to seeing the resources in more full form and trying this stuff out. So thank you so much.
Great, thanks. Great. We'll go to Alexi next.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it was very interesting. Thank you so much. Well, I heard today about problems with power dynamics that I saw many times at office, and for me, the most important thing is to be okay with my own power, because I usually do things that you talked today about, with power.
Mhm.
And for me, the most important goal, not to be such a boss you talked today about. That's what I got today from this meeting, and I hope that I'm moving forward. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining. And I'll read it out for you, Rodriguez. Power dynamics are very interesting. I work in a very hierarchy corporate environment, also very patriarchal, and a utility. I work with a lot of men that are way older than me. I don't struggle with power here as much, but in the past I have encountered ageism in the workplace, simply because someone assumed because they were older that they had more power. We follow a lot of the tips that you've recommended in my current job, which is refreshing. Great, that's awesome to hear. And I resonate with a lot of that, for sure. Fuzzy, would you like to go next?
Sure, can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
I want to call out the suggestion of rounds. I appreciate that. I've learned about that from sociocracy training, and they use it a lot in the sociocracy process, and I hadn't thought about it as a way of dealing with sort of oppressive power dynamics exactly, and so it's good to have that corroborated here. Also, I'm looking forward to seeing the materials that you're going to send out afterwards, and integrative consent and Collab. Is that a thing also? I forget the names.
Exactly.
Cool. And sharing those with my team. So thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I also think that we both went to the Cooperative Youth Convention. So I think that we
Whoa.
Yeah. Okay.
Like many years ago in Washington, D.C.
And never mind.
Emerging
maybe.
Co-op Leaders Program? No.
We'll connect afterward.
Okay. Sorry.
My fault. Thomas, would you like to go next?
Sure. I appreciate a lot the reminder that with like when there's these things that feel small but also feel big at the same time, of just kind of making incremental process and suggestions to the structure and letting that shake out a bit. I think like a part of me that gets stuck is like feeling like unless I can offer the perfect response, then I won't say anything, rather than just being like, well, like, okay, let's try this. Like, okay, let's push the ball forward a little bit, and not trying to, make the person who does have more power rightfully, or just from some other legacy structure, like not make them wrong or make them like, overly do it. Just be like, well, let's just try this out, see what happens. Because like what you, a few of you said about, the person probably feels a little bit ashamed about the existing power structure as it is. So it's kind of loosening up ways to transform those situations. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And I think Anna or Anne?
Yes. I really enjoyed hearing participants learning what you were talking about and trying it on for size. I thought that was really wonderful. I liked it.
Thanks. Thanks for joining. The power of learning from each other is definitely huge. And this 929 number might, I think this is two people, or one person with two boxes. Speak up if you're able to, and we'll go on to Cecile. Would you like to do a checkout of?
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It's been a delight to explore this territory. I think one of the things I'm taking with me is just a reminder of how important and foundational this question of power is in terms of our health and well-being in our workplaces. And it's exciting to feel the knowledge about that spreading into our larger culture. And thank you each for attending.
Yeah, and I'll close out last here. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. It's been really energizing. Also, definitely get the sense of hearing from other people's struggles that we're all connected in that way. And maybe that's a little kind of mushy in ways, but it definitely is really energizing for me to know that I'm not the only one. And we've mentioned Collab a few times in here. That's basically the methodology of all of these different pieces that we put together, similar to sociocracy and holacracy, those types of things, if you're familiar with that. And if you're interested in learning more, when I send out the templates, I'll also provide some information on that. But we have a pay what you can online course of some of these tools going in more depth. So if that's interesting to you, or if you have people that didn't come to this call that you think would be interested, please spread the word. We'd really appreciate that. And so great to meet you all. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Cool.
Bye.
Thanks, you guys. Have a great one.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate
Bye.
it.
Can you share those tips that you wrote down in any way?
Yeah, I can send those tips out.
That would be really nice. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do that.
Have a good day.
Okay,
Bye.
thanks
Thanks.
for joining. Let's see.